Yeah, well, I saw that when the New Left arose here, and the old left, which is mostly the USCP, didn't really like the way they acted in the rest. And at least the Jewish communists in New York City, which were by far the majority here, I think, they were very straight, middle-class people. And that isn't what the young people at that time were looking forward to. They were looking to escape that kind of Puritan tradition.
Well, you know, there are funny traditions. There's the surrealist tradition. There's the anarchic tradition. You're an anarchist. But for some reason, left and humor just don't seem to make it very often. Too bad. Anyway, as for effect, I think you can write. I mean, I do a syndicated column. I'm always amazed what they'll print, provided you tell a simple story and put the facts in the right order.
So if you've been, your articles don't get cut, do they? Or you wouldn't.
Well, syndication, they can use it or they can't. But I mean, no,
I mean use part of something, cut something out of it.
Oh, they might cut a line or two out of it. But you can write pretty much anything if you do it in a certain way. Most newspapering is a desperate attempt to keep the news away. You know.
Well, I thought it's to sell underwear.
Yeah, well, that's the basic function, is to sell underwear. And then the rest of it is an editing process to try and remove all interesting subject matter from the agenda of the people. And occasionally, something gets through. If you think of it that way around, you're onto something. Like, so I remember I'm just doing a book now with a friend of mine, Jeffrey, on, you know, CIA drug stuff. And we shall be out in June. Now, there's incredible evidence from 1945 on. I mean, volumes of it, that the CIA has been implicated with, you know, drug importing criminals. It began with Lucky Luciano, actually, in the alliance in the war. Every 5 years, someone puts this story up, and every 5 years, the mainstream press shoot it down. The last one it happened to was Gary Webb on the San Jose Mercury News in 1996. He published a very detailed story about, you know, the Contras, the CIA, and how the Contras and the CIA took guns down to give to the Contras and then flew back cocaine on the way back to raise money to pay for the whole Contra war. He put the story up, and as probably many people remember, every major newspaper went after him. The Times went after him, the New York Times, the LA Times went after him, the Washington Post went after him. And effectively, actually, by the time they were done, they'd forced the San Jose Mercury News to retract. They'd pretty much forced the San Jose Mercury News to force him out of his job. He's no longer in journalism now. Yet everything he said was absolutely incontrovertible, based on documents. It was the first time a major story, and this is, I think, why they freaked out, the powers that be, that all the documentation was on the web. I'm not a web guy, but you could read his story, and you could actually see, he'd say, according to a grand jury testimony which he had, there it was. According to this document, there it was, and people could get it. And I think that it was a search and destroy operation because the story was edging into view in a way that was very discomforting and worrying to them.
So then the web is, you better get into this, liable to have some kind of important effect on journalism and spreading information.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag, I think. You know, obviously there were tons of things on the web that people weren't able to get, starting with government documents. I mean, the other day, we were doing a story, a friend of mine and I were doing a story on, Gulf War syndrome and all that. And we used 3 separate government reports. Now, in the old days, you know, to get a GAO report or to get this report or that report, you'd have to go down to the other library that chances are wouldn't be there, or you'd have to send off the government a printing office and it cost you $20. Now, these days, Jeffrey, the guy I wrote with, pressed a button and he had them. That is a huge service.
And not only journalists can get them.
People
Anybody.
can get them. Anybody can
Real
get them.
people.
The downside is that an awful lot of hogwash goes
yeah.
around. And people, I mean, hogwash just, it's tidal waves of it go around. And people's capacity for believing nonsense is very, very large. That's unfortunate. The third thing is that very often I work with, lots of interns and people, that they tend to think research is like punching up Nexus on the internet. Now, Nexus is an expensive service where, it's old newspaper articles. Like you want a story from the New York Times or the Washington Post from 1993, you put in the code word CIA, you put in the word...
You mean they don't go after new information?
Well, they'll get all the stories. That's useful. But, very often there might be an interesting book in the library. Which the
library, Brian, we remember
the libraries?
Yeah.
Now, the library these days is a place where you have cocktail
But
parties.
they're going to put, I remember saying that with microfilm, this was like 40 years ago, you could put the entire Library of Congress on your desk, but you couldn't find anything.
That's right.
But eventually, they're doing more and more of that you'll be able to, eventually, if we live long enough and survive all the coming tragedies, you'll be able to get books into your home from
Tuli, I bet
library.
we're sitting here in your apartment and there's tons of books on the wall here, which the
I've read
viewers
them
can't
all
see.
twice.
I bet you most of these books will never get on any kind of...
Well, that's true. But
And these are all interesting books. Oh, he's doing a
That's
shot of
true.
it. Look at that. Do you ever see so
That's
many books
true.
in your life?
Wow. Books.
6,000, I counted them.
6,000 books.
you counted them. You're not supposed to.
So on this theory that newspapers are basically devices to stop people understanding the news. So I guess we should be in favor of the web from that point of view.
You know what's very interesting is to look at advertisements and turn the mute off. I mean, turn the mute on.
Right.
And then you'll see how stupid they are. You know, people jumping around, jumping through hoops, taking a crap, God knows what, smashing eggs. And then when the language comes on, you listen and it makes a kind of sense. It makes puts a grammatical order to this insanity trying to get you to buy things you don't need. So words, language is also used to deceive.
Like, look at corrections in newspapers. I mean, every day the New York Times runs a correction. It says, yesterday we referred to Mr. Kupferberg as Mr. Peter Kupferberg, and his name is not, it's Mr. Tuli Kupferberg.
And Sir Kupferberg, and he's not really...
And that, what does that really say? It says that everything else we said in the paper yesterday was true.
Yeah, someone...
That's very interesting.
Yeah, that's a function of that.
Never thought of that.
I have a collection of journalistic papers, and one journalist, or maybe even a judge, said everyone knows that papers lie all the time and don't tell the truth. Anyone who's ever been involved in a story that's reported can tell you this instantly. If you've been there, you know.
Well, isn't there a difference in American journalism and European journalism in that Europeans don't bother trying to be...
Tuli's interview with Alexandra Cockburn, with additional comments by myself, Norman Savitt, and Sylvia Top. Hope you enjoy it.
And who's the guy in your hand? Eating out of his hand?
This is Archie. He's the
Hockey, the star of our show.
he's the revolting news mascot.
No, we're his mascot.
Hopefully.